Glad you guys are here with us. Got a special guest in today. Matter of fact, this video was his idea. I'd like to introduce everybody to my boy Jay.
What's going on, man? Appreciate you having me on, man. I'm excited to be a part of this. It's gonna be fun.
Man, no doubt, no doubt. I'm just glad that you're on with me. So I'm gonna go ahead and let you introduce the topic, man. It was your idea, and of course, when you brought it to my attention, and I was like, okay, this boy got me doing some homework. I got to give it to him.
Yes, sir. Coming off the heels of Last Dance, man. Obviously, a documentary that detailed the '90s run of the Chicago Bulls. Obviously, the cornerstone of that run was Michael Jeffrey Jordan, the greatest player of all time. I don't think there's any debate about that anymore. For me, I kind of started thinking outside the box and wanted to know, who's the more underrated players of the history of the game? Who are the guys who maybe aren't looked at and aren't appreciated for what they did when they played? And thought I'd, hit you up and say, hey, let's go over those top 5 underrated players of all time.
Yes, sir. So I'm gonna go ahead and get it started, Jay. I'm gonna hit you with, how about ISO Joe Johnson? He was a 7-time All-Star and a 10-time All-NBA player. This is a guy that was a walking bucket. Of course, he had the nickname ISO Joe. And, he could probably get you 20 any given night just easily. I think he was very underrated because he wasn't a household name, but he was very consistent. And like I said, he was also an All-Star and an All-NBA player.
ISO Joe at number 5. Okay, I see where we're going with this one. Okay, I see. All right. Number 5 for me was Kevin Johnson. Kevin Johnson, a 3-time All-Star, a 5-time All-NBA player, and one of the 5 players in the history of the league to average 20 points per game and 10 assists per game in at least 3 seasons. One of the cornerstones of the Phoenix Suns when they made their run as one of the better teams in the beginning of the 90s in the Western Conference. Obviously, we know we had an opportunity in the finals to take down the Bulls, and we know what happened there. But certainly, Charles Barkley is one of the greatest players ever. But I think even he'd admit, without having Kevin Johnson on his team, they wouldn't have got where they were. So he's my number 5 most underrated player of all time.
Yo, that was a good pick, man. I don't know why I didn't think of Kevin Johnson. One of the most underrated for sure. I think injuries kind of hampered him a little bit. If he had stayed healthy, there's no telling what his career would have done. I think he would have been a first ballot shoe-in Hall of Famer for sure. I think my next one, man, for you is gonna be Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, Chris Jackson. I believe he was Steph Curry before Steph Curry, man. The dude's jumper was ice water. Got blackballed later on in his career because of his stance against police brutality and other social injustices in this country.
Mahmoud,
yes,
that's
bro.
A great pick, bro.
Yes.
For sure. And a guy who is still shooting people's eyes out right now, the big 3 in his 50s. So that just goes to show how pure his shot is. So that's a great pick, bro. Number 4 for me is going to be Adrian Dantley. He's a guy who was a 6-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA, 2-time scoring champion, and a guy who actually scored 30 points per game or more in 4 straight seasons when he was with Utah. Got traded to the Pistons, and his shots diminished because, you're playing with the bad boys. So you got your Bill Lambiers, you got your Isaiah Thomases, your Joe Dumars. So your shots are going to drop, so his numbers consequently dropped. Actually got into a riff with Isaiah, and that's why he got traded to Dallas from Mark Aguirre. So he actually missed out on the opportunity to win those championships that the Bad Boys won, but didn't take away from how great he was when he was at his peak, and deserves a lot of credit. So Adrian Dantley for me is my number 4.
Bruh, you just brought back up memories, right? Adrian Dantley. Dang, I remember when I was a kid, he got traded for Mark Aguirre, and I was kind of like, but now that was a good one. I would have never thought of that one either. Since we taking it back like that, man, I'm gonna go ahead and hit you with one that I feel like is really underrated, that he does not get enough praise or credit or, just enough anything. And that's Mark Price. I think if it wasn't for Isaiah, Magic Johnson, Stockton, guys like that, kind of, blocking his shine a little bit, I think he would have been one of the top point guards in the league. He was actually was one of the top point guards, my bad. But he was a 4-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA. I think he would have had more credit or more praise if he didn't have to run into Jordan so many times.
I can't lie to you, bro. Mark Price almost made my list too. He's one of the better shooters of all time, and to your point, I think he was just kind of a victim of circumstance in terms of the other point guards that were in the league. That way, he didn't really get as much credit as he should have. But definitely underrated for sure. Number 3 for me was Alex English, 8-time NBA All-Star, 3-time All-NBA. Actually won a scoring championship one year, but the thing that stuck out to me was the fact that he went 8 years straight, averaging at least 25 points per game. From the 80-81 season to the 88-89 season, this guy scored at least 25 points a game. And playing for the Nuggets, they were good, but they weren't great. And they obviously ran into the Lakers a lot, so they didn't really have a chance to really make it to the opportunity for a championship. I think that's what kind of held him back from getting this proper due. But Alex English for sure was one of the walking buckets in the 80s, no question.
Dog, that's a good pick, Alex English. I never would have thought about him either. Very underrated. Was a big scorer. Was top 10 for the longest before Dirk, LeBron, and Kobe passed him up. Didn't get a lot of credit, didn't get a lot of spotlight because he played in a market like Denver. Had he played in New York or Boston, somewhere like that, definitely would have got more spotlight. The next pick I'm going to give you, man, is I think you'll like this one, Damian Lillard. To me, the most underrated player right now in the league. He's a 5-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA. Should be in there more as All-NBA and All-Star. Doesn't get a lot of credit because of the city he plays in, is Portland. If he played somewhere in a bigger market, definitely would have got more love. Yes, sir, for sure.
Game time. Appreciate the shout out, bro. Yes, sir. My second favorite player behind Luka, so I appreciate that.
Right.
Number 2 for me was Dominique Wilkins, 9-time NBA All-Star, 7-time All-NBA, scoring champ in 1986. And so you may hear those numbers and say, well, how is he underrated? Look at the accomplishments he had. But for me, I think he's underrated because people don't appreciate his whole game now when they look back on him. People look back on him now and say, oh, he was one of the greatest dunkers of all time. And that is true. But he also had a great all-around game, at least from an offensive perspective. And just a prime example of that, he left the league for a year to go play overseas. He came back, signed with the Spurs, came off the bench for the Spurs, and led the team in scoring. So I just think he gets underrated as far as his overall offensive ability. People just look at the dunks, and it's true because he was one of the best dunkers ever. But
yeah, that's definitely a great pick right there, man. His dunking did overshadow his overall game as a player. One of the best players in the 80s and the 90s. Didn't really have a lot of help like Jordan and Magic and Bird. I think if he did have at least one more All-Star with him, there's no telling what he could have done. But that's a good pick, man. I think I'm gonna stay in that generation of players. I'm gonna have to give you probably, in my opinion, the most underrated player of all time who doesn't get a lot of credit, and that's Scottie Pippen. He's a 10-time All-Defensive player, 7-time All-Star, 7-time All-NBA, and one of the 50 greatest players of all time. Got overshadowed by Michael Jordan because of his greatness, but this dude right here, man, it's what you can say about him, man. It's just, you can't really say enough about Scottie Pippen, man. The documentary really didn't do him any justice.
I think that's a unanimous choice, man. I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that doesn't agree with that. So, Scottie Pippen is my number 1 most underrated player of all time as well. So I won't go over the stats like you just did. I don't want to repeat them, but I will say that for me, a lot of people look back at that era, particularly with the Bulls, and say like, oh well, Scottie was MJ's Robin, MJ being Batman. But I don't look at it like that. To me, honestly, I look at it like Scottie was Batman and Michael was Superman. And I think you saw in '94 when MJ left how much talent and ability that Scottie had that was kind of held down because of MJ's usage rate, which it's understandable. But I think it just goes to show what he can bring to the table. You list all the accolades. I just don't think there's any debate. There shouldn't be, at least, about who's the most underrated player of all time.
Man, that was definitely well said, man. I got to give it up to you. So before we go, man, I think I'm gonna start doing this from now on with all my guests. You gotta let me know before we go. Who do you have as the GOAT?
Bro, I'm gonna just say this. I think it's a great idea to do this segment because now what's gonna happen is every time I watch one of your shows and somebody gives a different answer than Michael Jordan, I'm gonna follow them on Instagram and I'm gonna block them because they don't know anything about sports and they shouldn't be talking to you, if I'm being honest. At the end of the day, I wasn't even a Michael Jordan fan growing up. I thought he was too much of a ball hog. I thought he was selfish. I thought he was arrogant as hell. I didn't like him. But you have to respect how good he was. And I think even with the doc coming out, if you objectively watch that doc, there's no way you walk out of that and not think that he's the greatest unless you're just like blinded by being a LeBron stan. For me, it's only one answer to that question, and it's Michael Jordan for sure.